January signings, sometimes they work out, other times not so much. Let's have a look at some of the biggest deals throughout the January transfer window and take a look at how they're currently getting on. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. For today's video, I thought we'd have a little bit of a look back at the January window, and as it's been a couple of months now, players have had the opportunity to bed in at their new clubs. I think we've seen a varying degree of success with some of the deals that were done in that January window. Let me know down below, players that signed for your club in January, who do you think's got on well so far and who hasn't quite hit the ground running as of yet. One player that I wanted to touch on first of all was Sam Cosgrove at Birmingham. Obviously made the move over from Aberdeen in January for a fee rising up to around £2 million, I believe, which was reported at the time. He's walked into Birmingham in a difficult time. It's not exactly been the easiest of circumstances to bed in a new striker. If we look at the minutes that he's played so far this season, rarely sort of gets over 20 minutes a game so far. He's had 6 appearances coming off the bench, obviously had an injury when he came over as well. And it is an incredibly small sample size that we're judging him off so far, but he's not quite hit the ground running that maybe a few Birmingham fans were hoping he'd be able to. You know, I mean, we all remember last January when they went ahead and signed Scott Hogan and how magnificent he was for a short burst of time. Cosgrove hasn't quite had that same impact so far. But then next up to a January signing that has worked out so far, and that's James Garner at Nottingham Forest. I think he'd be an absolute steal if they managed to get him back on loan for next season as well, because he's added a breath of fresh air into that midfield really. It was all a little bit too predictable before Garner's arrival, and his season this year in the Championship has been quite the interesting one. Spent the first half of the season out on loan at Watford, where for me I thought he started out quite brightly but just seemed to fade a little bit as the season went on at Watford. But to be fair, there were some other circumstances going on behind the scenes. You know, Watford's form in general tailed off a little bit. There was uncertainties over the management, but since coming in at Nottingham Forest, he gives them a little bit of a different dynamic in midfield. He doesn't look to be the sort of safe and predictable midfielder that maybe Forest have a couple too many of. Obviously he got the goal against Derby as well, which makes him a bit of a cult hero already. But yeah, James Garner, big future ahead of him, and would be a really nice purchase for Forest to get him back on loan for next season. But to be honest with you, I think two of the best January signings have been made each by Barnsley, with the additions of Daryl Dike and Colton Morris, key factors in this recent amazing run that they've gone on to get themselves into the top 6. Between them, they've already scored 11 goals since signing in January. They're quite different players with the way they go about playing, but I think they've each added a new sort of dynamic to the way that Barnsley like to go forward. The Daryl Dike situation especially is one that I'm fascinated with to see how that all unfolds in the summer. Of course, he's originally signed for Barnsley on a loan deal. There is, you know, seemingly some sort of option to turn it permanent, and you really have to give the plaudits here for Barnsley for some fantastic recruitment. Ben Pearson's move over to Bournemouth in January was a big transfer. Obviously, you guys know me on the channel, big Ben Pearson fan, and I think he's done well so far. The question that I'd have for Woodgate is, how does he sort of strike the balance with this Bournemouth midfield? They no longer have the advantage of playing Lewis Cook since he picked up his injury. I think that's quite the blow actually. Up until his injury, he'd probably been my most consistent performer for Bournemouth up until that point. I think that's a fair comment. Pearson, I do think he's a very good option for this Bournemouth squad though. It's all about getting the best out of him by the players you play around him though. Stoke signed a couple of wingers in the January window, Jack Clark and Robbie Matondo coming in on loan. Jack Clark's the winger who we've seen a little bit more of in the Championship, with 6 starts and 8 appearances off the bench. He's had a couple of bursts here and there and is still quite a raw player, to be honest with you, isn't he? Played very well in the Wickham game where he got an assist in that one. Matondo though, we've not really seen all too much of him. Just the 2 starts since signing for Stoke. He had a bit of an injury to deal with. I think Michael O'Neill said at one point that he just wants to see more from him before he's putting him into the starting 11. So yeah, Stoke fans, what have you sort of made of the limited amount of time you've seen from Matondo so far? Henry Lansbury at Bristol City signed on until the end of the season. I've not been all too convinced by him so far, to be honest with you. Lansbury's always been a bit of a hot and cold player throughout his years in the Championship, really, with Forest and then with Villa. Middlesbrough's January recruitment on the whole, I think, has been really positive so far in terms of how all these new players have bedded in. Donald Fisher, I think, has been a nice addition into that Borough back line. Obviously, his debut was absolutely fantastic, marking Todd Cantwell out of the game for the 90 minutes. I'm still baffled as to why North End let him go. And then Cabano and Balassi, I think, have each added 2 Borough's options moving forward. Balassi's a player who I've loved watching over the years, and you can tell watching him when he's on the ball that he still very much has that quality about him. And then Cabano can be a really explosive option to come in off the bench. So yeah, some nice business done by Borough so far. I think they've all settled in quite well. Preston's January transfer window was mental with the amount of players that we signed, but the one that I really wanted to touch on was Daniel Everson and how much he's actually improved us in terms of a goalkeeper coming in. So if we look at the goalkeeper stats in the Championship so far this season. Daniel Everson, since arriving in January, has the 4th best save percentage out of all Championship goalkeepers who have played so far this season. 75% save percentage there. If we're comparing his numbers to Declan Rudd, who was 27th for save percentage in the league, he's been quite remarkable since coming in, really. And to be honest, I feel quite sorry for him because the defence in front of him, on the whole, has been really poor. Dug us out on so many occasions so far this season. If we somehow manage to pull anything off to get him back for next season, it'll be a masterstroke by the club. Judge Evans, who arrived at Millwall in January, signing from Derby, I think he's been a really nice addition into this Millwall side so far. Obviously quite adaptable. He can play either in midfield or in that back three. Rowett obviously clearly rates him after working with him previously at Derby, and his career at Derby really was sort of hampered by injuries, but it's nice to see him getting back up and going at the moment now, and I think that Millwall's a nice fit for him at this stage of his career. When it comes to QPR and their January acquisitions, there's quite a few that we can pick up on here because I think they did some excellent business. Obviously Charlie Austin will be the one that a lot of people point towards. Jordi Device, I think, has been a nice addition into their backline so far, but the one that I really want to talk about was Stefan Johansson and how impressive he's actually been since coming into this QPR midfield. Just gives them that real bit of quality and control back into midfield. Now Johansson's quite the interesting player, really, because I sort of feel like the last couple of seasons that we've seen him in the Championship, we've sort of just like brushed over his performances. You know, last time with Fulham he was used a little bit more. He was sort of in and out of that squad really throughout the season, wasn't he? Previously to that he was with West Brom, where he didn't get all too much game time when he was out on loan there. But this season's really quite reminiscent of his days at Fulham back in like 2017/18. If QPR do manage to turn that one permanent, that'll be a brilliant deal for them. Sheff Wednesday obviously went back in for Sam Hutchinson in the January window. He re-signed for them, and I wasn't all too keen on this signing at the time, but to be honest, he's been alright for Wednesday so far for me. He's played more lately as a centre-half for them, opposed to in midfield, where he's probably more suited to now. I'd say he's been fairly steady. Wednesday fans, would you give him a new contract going into next season? Let me know down below. Swansea and the signing of Hourihane has been a really interesting one. I remember saying at the time that I thought that that one was going to go down as the best January signing by quite some distance, actually, and I mean Swansea have certainly seen the quality that he offers from dead ball situations and in and around the box. I mean, in some of the matches he's made all the difference for them, especially when he did first sign. But it's interesting, I've seen some people on Twitter talking about what does he actually offer apart from that in and around the box and actually from open play. And when you look into his numbers, Hourihane's a really interesting player to analyse. If you look at sort of his involvement in the play up until it gets into the final third, he's maybe not as instrumental in those deeper positions than we perhaps thought he might be coming into this season. So on average, Matt Grimes averages around about 55 passes per 90 for Swansea this season. Compare that to Hourihane, who averages about 30 passes per 90. Once again with Hourihane, I think it's all about getting the best players around him to strike that balance in the midfield, because I think that what he does offer in the final third, he's got to be starting. Philip Zinckernagel was a player who came over to Watford in January with some unbelievable numbers coming over from the Norwegian League, but obviously it's always the question of how's that transferable over to the Championship. Well, of late especially, I think that Zinckernagel has really been coming into his own. He gives Watford another creative option, someone who they probably were lacking to play like this in the first half of the season. I mean, his last game against Rotherham, he was absolutely dazzling, quick footwork, and has added quite a bit to that midfield since coming in. Taylor Hallwood-Bellis out on loan at Blackburn really interests me, especially after his latest performance away at Norwich, where I thought he was absolutely brilliant. He started to form a bit of a partnership with Darragh Lenihan. Obviously, Blackburn have played the loan market quite well over the last couple of years. Obviously, Toshin Adebayo was the player who came on loan there last season into that centre of defence and has since gone on to have a Premier League move. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Hallwood-Bellis following along on a similar path, but obviously Rovers fans will be hoping to get him back for the full season next time round, won't they? Brentford turned the loan deal for Simon Ghoddos into a permanent in January, and to be honest with you, even with sort of all the football that Ghoddos has played this season, I still don't know if he's any good. He's been a really hit and miss, quite mixed bag so far this season. He came out and did an interview with Brentford the other day, actually, which I found quite interesting, where he basically came out and said that he didn't think that his performances have been good enough up until this point, which takes some, guts to come out and say, publicly, and he sort of recognises that he wants to kick on now with Brentford. I still do think that there is a player in there somewhere, because we have seen flashes of it this season, albeit not consistently enough. Cardiff's best January signing at this point in time has to go down as pair Perry and G. He was someone who I really wanted North End to go after in the January window after we let go of Darnell Fisher. But yeah, really good addition for this Cardiff squad so far. In terms of some of their other additions, the likes of Max Watters and Johnny Williams, we've not really seen enough of them, but Perry and G coming in slotted right into that Cardiff backline, been a really efficient member of it so far. We spoke about Lewis Wing a couple of videos ago, but I think he's been a really nice addition into this Rotherham squad, and I'd be interested to see if they manage to sort of negotiate some sort of deal with him moving on into next season, because I think that he adds to the balance of the midfield. It's something that we've spoken about a few times on this video so far. I think that it allows Barlaser to drop in a little bit deeper and dictate things from a different role. But yeah, Lewis Wing's quality in those areas in the final third, I think he's added quite a bit of quality to this Rotherham midfield. Adebayo, I think, has been a really nice addition for Luton in January. Obviously, last season the forward two was Cornick and Collins. Those two worked quite well in harmony together, but with Harry Cornick having a bit of a different role this season, obviously not actually scored himself, they were in need of a bit more of a goal scorer, and I think they've got that so far. Now, Huddersfield have actually just completed the new signing over the last few days of the striker Umar Niasse. He was being linked around a few clubs, but Huddersfield have got that one over the line, obviously looking for a bit more firepower for the end of this season. Huddersfield fans, let me know down below, do you think this one's going to work out or not? Patrick Roberts out alone at Derby until the end of the season's one player who I'm still going to be keeping quite a keen eye on, because his last few loan moves haven't quite gone to plan yet, and it feels like he needs to find a home away from Manchester City. So this time round at Derby, because we all sort of feel like there is a real player in there, this is really the time for him to deliver. And Victor Gyökeres at Coventry is another player who sort of needs to prove himself in the second half of the season. Obviously his loan spell initially at Swansea didn't particularly go to plan. With Coventry and their sort of lack of goals recently, they're in need of a number 9 to be putting the ball in the back of the net. I did notice the other week that he did score a brace for the under-23, so I'm interested to see how much he's involved for their run-in from now on in. And then for Dimitris Giannoulis coming into Norwich on the whole, I think he's been a fairly decent addition into their backline so far this season as well. Obviously they've had quite the number of left-backs that Norwich have gone through so far this season, but it takes quite the specialised player to play in that system under Daniel Farke with what he sort of asks of his full-backs. But that will wrap it up for today's video, guys. So there were just some of the picks of players who were signed in January who have been some top performers and some who haven't quite hit those levels as of yet. Do let me know in the comments down below, players from your clubs, who do you think has been great so far that signed in January and who haven't quite lived up to expectations. Apart from that though, that will now wrap it up for today's video, guys. If you did go in to enjoy it, make sure to leave a like, check out all the links down below, check out the Patreon. But apart from that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.